Hello, my name is Michaela DeForest, and I'm a developer here at the ATS Group and Galileo Suite. Welcome to this video series on monitoring Kubernetes and cloud-native applications with Zabbix. Throughout this series, we will learn how to install the necessary component to monitor a cluster with Zabbix, understand the metrics generated within Zabbix, and exploit Prometheus endpoints exposed by applications to monitor application-specific metrics. Zabbix monitors Kubernetes by collecting metrics exposed via the Kubernetes API and kubestate metrics. The components necessary to monitor a cluster are installed within the cluster using this Helm chart provided by Zabbix. The Helm chart includes the Zabbix agent installed as a daemon set and is used to monitor local resources and applications on each node. A Zabbix proxy is also installed to collect monitoring data and transfer it to the external Zabbix server. Only the Zabbix proxy needs to have access to the Zabbix server, while the agents can send data to the proxy installed in the same namespace as each agent. A cluster role gives Zabbix the ability to access resources in the cluster via the Kubernetes API. While the cluster role could be modified to restrict privileges given to Zabbix, this will result in missing items. We recommend that this is not modified if you want to get the most out of Kubernetes monitoring with Zabbix. The Zabbix Helm chart installs the kubestate metrics project as a dependency. You may already be familiar with this project under the Kubernetes organization, which generates Prometheus format metrics based on the current state of the Kubernetes resources. If you have experience using Prometheus and Grafana to monitor a cluster, you may already have this installed. If that is the case, you can choose to point to this deployment rather than installing another one. In this tutorial, we will be installing kubestate metrics via the Zabbix Helm chart. For more information on how to skip this step, refer to the values file in the Zabbix Kubernetes Helm chart. Now that we've explained how the Zabbix Helm chart works, let's go ahead and install it. In this tutorial, we will assume that you have a running Zabbix 6.0 or higher instance that is reachable from the cluster that you wish to monitor. Here I have a running 6.0 instance, which runs in a different cluster than the one we wish to monitor. The server is reachable via the DNS name mdeforest.zabbix.atsgroup.io with a non-standard port of 31103. We will start by installing the latest Zabbix Helm chart. I recommend visiting zabbix.com/integrations/Kubernetes to get any sources that may be referred to in this tutorial. There you will find a link to the Zabbix Helm chart and templates. For the most part, we will be following the steps outlined in the README. In my terminal window here, I'm going to make sure the active cluster is set to the cluster that I want to monitor. So I'm going to just run kubectx, change to the cluster I want to monitor. And then I'm going to add the Zabbix chart repo to my local Helm repository. In this case, I already have the chart installed, but if you don't, you're just going to want to run that command. If you're running Zabbix 6.2, make sure you change the references to 6.0 in this command to 6.2. You're going to need to set a few values for the installation depending on your circumstances. In most cases, you only need to set a few environment variables for the Zabbix agent and the proxy. The full list of values and environment variables are available in the Helm chart repo and alongside the agent and proxy images on Docker Hub. In this case, I'm setting the passive server environment variable for the agent to allow any IP to connect. For the proxy, I'm setting the server host that will be accessible from the proxy alongside the non-standard port. I've also set here some variables related to cache size. These variables may depend on the size of your cluster, so you may need to play around with them to find the right values. Okay, now that I have the values file ready, I'm ready to install the chart. So we'll use helm install -f and then the path to my values file. Zabbix, and then Zabbix chart -6.0 / Zabbix helm chart, which is the path to the helm chart in the Zabbix chart repository. So that might vary depending on what version of the chart you're using. And then you can also optionally add a namespace. So I'm going to put this in the monitoring namespace. And let's go ahead and execute that. You will need to wait until everything is running. So I'll just check that with watch kubectl get pods. And we'll just wait for that to be up and running. Now that everything is installed, we're ready to set up hosts in Zabbix that will be associated with the cluster. One last step before we have all the information we need is to get the token created via the service account that was installed with the Helm chart. We'll get this by running kubectl get secret Zabbix-service account, which is the name of the service account that was created, and then set the JSON path equal to .data.token. This is going to get the secret that was created for the service account and grab just the token from that. And then we'll just pipe that to base 64-D in order to decode it. And I'm just going to copy that value somewhere else so that I have it for later. You'll also need the Kubernetes API endpoint. In most cases, you'll use the proxy that was installed rather than the server directly, or a proxy outside of the cluster. If this is the case, you can use the service DNS for the API. We should be able to reach it by https kubernetes.default.svc.cluster.local:443/API. If this is not the case, you will probably use the output of the command kubectl cluster-info. Okay, let's head over to the Zabbix UI. All the templates we need are shipped in Zabbix 6. If for some reason you can't find them, they are available for download and import by visiting the integrations page that I pointed out earlier on the Zabbix site. First, we will add our proxy by heading to Administration and Proxies. Click Create Proxy. And because this is an active proxy by default, we just need to specify the proxy name. So if you didn't make any changes to the Helm chart, this should just default to Zabbix-proxy. If you'd like to name this differently, you can change the environment variable zbx_host name for the proxy in the Helm chart, but we're just going to leave it as the default for now. So you're going to enter this name and then go ahead and click Add. After a few minutes, you'll start to see that it says that the proxy has been seen. Next, we're going to want to create a host group where we can put hosts related to Kubernetes. So let's just create one, which we'll just call Kubernetes. Now we'll go over to the host page and under configuration and click create host. The first host is going to be used for collecting metrics related to monitoring Kubernetes nodes, and we'll discover nodes and create new hosts using Zabbix low-level discovery. Let's just give this host the name Kubernetes nodes. We'll also assign this host to the Kubernetes host group that we created and attach the template Kubernetes nodes by HTTP. We will also want to change the line monitored by proxy to the proxy that we created earlier called Zabbix proxy. Next, you're going to click the macros tab and select inherited and host macros. You should be able to see all of the macros that may be set to influence what is monitored in your cluster. In this case, we just need to change the first two macros. The first, kube.api.endpoint.url, should be set to the Kubernetes API endpoint. So in our case, we can set it to what I mentioned earlier, which is kubernetes.default.svc.cluster.local:443/API. The token should be set to the value we retrieved from the command line previously. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab that. Put that in there. Okay. So this host is all set. So let's go ahead and click add. After a few minutes, you should start seeing data on the latest data page as well as new hosts on the host page, representing each node. Okay, so let's create another host now that will represent the metrics available via the Kubernetes API and the kubestate metrics endpoint. Click create host again. We'll name this host Kubernetes cluster state. And add it to the Kubernetes group again. And then we're also going to attach the template named Kubernetes cluster state by HTTP. Again, we're going to choose the proxy that we created earlier. And then in this macros section, we will change the kube.api.url to the same thing that we used before, but this time we're going to leave off the /API at the end. So kubernetes.default.svc.cluster.local:443. And then we're also going to set the token like we did before. Okay, so assuming nothing else was changed in this installation of the Helm chart, we can now just add that host. And then after a few minutes, you should start receiving metrics related to the cluster state, including hosts representing the kubelet on each node. And now you're all set to start monitoring your Kubernetes cluster in Zabbix. Thanks for watching, and in the next video, we'll take a look at what you can do with your newly monitored cluster and how to get the most out of it.